Welcome back. I am excited about this one because this just goes into more detail about how we are able to communicate with our tenants and what that looks like. And so what we usually do is we've got our lease, but the lease is not always enough. It goes into what is required by law and what you expect if you need to go to court. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't break into detail at what point is tenant responsibility, what is owner responsibility, at what point we're stepping in, and how all of that works. So what we do is we create a tenant guide, and this tenant guide is very detailed. It's probably like 30 pages long, and what it does is it goes over all of those details, and we give that to the tenant when they sign their lease. So let's get into what that looks like. Okay, here we have, let's go. So at the very beginning, this is what we use for property management. So you can take this information and you can use it for you as a landlord and just cater it to the things. This might be too detailed for what you need, but you can take bits and pieces of this and use it for what you need and have it fit perfectly for the way you want to handle the management of your properties. But for us, since we manage a ton of properties, we've got this tenant handbook that goes over everything. For us, we've got different outsourcing for what maintenance look like, who they call, what happens after hours, all of those things. You might not have all of that, and that's fine. You just want to make sure that you edit it in order to make it suitable for your needs. So we don't need to go into all of the phone calls. That's more for us. You're going to put into everything that you're going to find interesting, that you're going to find valuable. Emergency calls is a good one to look at, how you're handling them. We do answer our calls 24/7 if it's an emergency. However, if it's not deemed an emergency, we won't call them back till the next business day. The rental lease agreement, they're supposed to be getting copies of all of those, making sure that they've got it, what their moving checklist, which we went over in the checklist and addendum section. So you have that. The cable and utility company, this just breaks down all of that. The biggest part, though, is under maintenance. We've got what it looks like to submit a maintenance request. For us, they have to go through a portal. That way we can track any maintenance. If you want to take a phone call, that's fine, but I would make sure it was also followed up by an email as well. That way you have it in writing. There's been times where we've had tenants claim that they told us about work that needs to be done and it was a phone call. However, per our policy, phone calls are not enough to actually submit a work order. That has what saved us a lot of times, having this detailed guide that our tenants have signed and understood when we go to court. So there was an example, we had a tenant slip and fall, and they said that they told us that there was a downspout that was broken, but we didn't know about it. Well, they never submitted a service request the proper way. So what happened was the liability was then on them to notify us in proper channels. This talks about different renovations that they're allowed, tenant maintenance, what they're responsible for. This breaks down very clearly that they're responsible for the smoke alarm batteries. What we're responsible for is making sure all of those things are in the property and functioning when they get there. From then, during the time of their lease, it is then their responsibility. Now, just also remember, if they wind up being a HUD tenant, HSP tenant, anything that takes a voucher, some of these things might get modified because sometimes they require those types of things to be back on the owner and not the tenant. So requesting maintenance, as I was saying, what your policies are going to be, non-emergency situations, preventative cleaning tips. We even go into as far as flushable wipes and flushable things that say they're flushable are not actually flushable. So making sure that they understand that, not to throw grease down the drains. We go into a lot of detail about what it looks like and additional cleaning tips and how to maintain the property in a proper fashion. One other big thing is making sure that they have renter's insurance. While we require renter's insurance, we can't tell them who to use in order to get the renter's insurance, but by our lease, it is required. So making sure that they have that and making sure their contents are covered in the event that there is some issue that happens with the property. That way, they don't have to worry about replacing all of their belongings, and that is what their renter's insurance will cover. We're drug-free housing, and this just talks about giving their notice, pest control, trash landscape, who's responsible for all of this. So one thing that we do is we put getting to know the property, where the main circuit breaker is, the gas shutoff valve. These are all really important things, the water shutoff. A lot of this for single family properties, townhomes, things like that. That way, if there is an emergency and there's a pipe that burst, we can easily tell them and they know already where that main water shutoff is that they can go and find and take care of. That way it doesn't cause more damage to the property, waiting for one of our maintenance crews to go and stop the water. Different maintenance responsibilities. We talked about this. If there's an emergency, to call 911 before they even contact us. Preventative tips, additional cleaning tips. I think we went through this. One of the things that I'm trying to find that it talks about what to do if they want to go on vacation and how to set the property up so things are turned off and there's no potential damage to the property while they're away. Holiday tips, how to handle that. But one thing that I wanted to talk about is we even have where it breaks down if there's an emergency and the HVAC is shut down. In different times of the year, it could be an emergency or it can just be one of those issues where we've got to get someone out there to the property. We deem that and we put it in our tenant handbook by what temperature it is inside, both in the summer and the winter. That's how we determine if it's an emergency or not, if the temperature has dropped below a certain amount or has risen above a certain amount. So those are all things that you want to keep in mind. There will be times if there's an HVAC issue that it might be a little bit cold or a little bit hot in that property, but it's not truly an emergency till it gets to this point. And while I understand there's some discomfort to the tenants with that, there are a few things that can be done. If you're working diligently to get a vendor out to the property, you're doing as much as you can. If it's truly an emergency and the temperatures are really hot inside and they can't stay there, offset those costs by putting them in a hotel or negotiate what that might look like and if they need to go stay with family. But make sure that you're in constant communication with them and how you can handle each situation. There are sometimes where a tenant is going to cry so loud and the issue might not be that bad, but as long as you've got this tenant guide of what the expectations are, we've been able to work through tenants who are in essence throwing a temper tantrum for something that is not that big of a deal. And per our agreement, they understand when we're coming out. They might not like it, but that is what has already been agreed upon. So having this and having a detailed, clear understanding of when you're going out, what is an emergency, and how to handle it from there is really important to help mitigate some of those big, arguments or disagreements or things that may end up in court. That's one thing that we have found is the more detailed that we can be, the same page that everyone is on, the better it is in the long run. And it makes it very clear if we do have to go to court that we can say, no, Your Honor, this is what our agreement says. The tenant clearly has signed right here. They understand, they read, and they've seen this. This is also what our lease agreement says. And we can back everything up that we do because it's all in writing and our tenants have signed it. So I would never make an agreement with the tenants that is not in writing. Back in the day, we used to be able to do everything by handshake and, everyone held to their word. That doesn't happen anymore. And not to say someone's not going to be held to their word. They might have forgotten, or it might just be confusing in their mind and they might think one thing and it actually was another. So to put everything in writing is very important, making sure that all parties agree to what it looks like and to have this additional resources to make sure that the people in the situation, tenants, landlords, property managers in our case, know what's happening and know at what point we're able to step in and do the effort that we need on our part. So I hope that helps. Once again, you can modify this as much or as little as you need. Put your name into it if you're the landlord, and then just have the tenant initial or sign it to make sure that everyone's read and agrees to what this is.